We are fortunate in that a lot of our leadership, they were part of the system. I think we do work pretty well together.
Kathy Duda is the head of the labor union for patent examiners, which means she's losing even more sleep than most, thinking about the administration's return to office policies and how they'll impact the USPTO. But amidst all the angst, Kathy remains optimistic in the collaboration with USPTO leadership, including Acting Director Coke Morgan Stewart.
I think they do respect the examiners. I think they do respect the union and that we are here to help the examiners, but to help the office.
Welcome to Clause 8, presented by TradeSpace, a revolutionary end-to-end AI-powered IP management platform that helps companies unlock the value of their IP. If you enjoy this show, please take a minute to subscribe at voiceofip.com. During Kathy's 20-plus years experience with POPA, the Union of Patent Examiners at the USPTO, she has experienced transitioning administrations before. In today's episode, which was recorded on February 13th, she explains why she remains hopeful about the current transition, even amidst uncertainty and angst. And now, here's your host, Eli Mauser.
Kathy Duda is here, and thank you for joining us. She's the head of the POPA, which is the Union of the Patent Examiners at the U.S. Patent Office. And of course, I knew all of you, but I have a good friend, I could say, Dan Brown, Professor Dan Brown, who was on the PPAC with you, which is the committee that advises the USPTO about what they should do.
Yep.
And I didn't realize that maybe until he told me that actually the head of the Patent Examiners Union is on that, and he told me, and he was like, "You got to have her on. You got to have her on."
That's nice of him.
But when I reached out to you, it was about 2 years ago. You said you're negotiating the collective bargaining agreement.
Yes.
And I apologize. I was pretty ignorant about the subject, but I'm like, all right, it's going to be wrapped up pretty quickly.
No. I could have told you that, but no. Takes a while.
Yeah. And then it was finally wrapped up
right around Labor Day. That was when we finished with the mediators. But then after that, of course, there's a lot of cleanup work, let's call it, that you have to do.
But they made the announcement in December, or did they?
That's when we actually signed it.
Oh, okay, got it. And the announcement said it was the first time in 40 years. Is that right?
Just about, yes, because we'd had a couple attempts to renegotiate it. And what we did this time, too, which is probably maybe sometimes a little unusual, we actually renegotiated the whole thing. This was a brand new contract from the beginning type of thing.
The last 40 years, how did...
Okay, what happens is that you have the basic CBA, collective bargaining agreement there, and we did all these side agreements. We probably had about a couple hundred what are called MOUs, Memorandums of Understanding.
So it was really like the whole thing. Anything, I guess, that drove this effort to get it done?
Well, because in the first Trump administration, they said, if you've got an expired contract, they wanted them negotiated. So that's what actually opened it up.
Oh, wow. So it lasted actually longer than the last administration.
Yes.
And we're meeting outside of the patent office, but geographically close. And it's because you work in the patent office, and I'm sure when you started, most people were in the patent office. Any, I guess, reflections from how that's evolved over the years?
Yeah, it's a lot different. I mean, when I started, I didn't have a computer on my desk. Yeah. All of the patents were in shoes. We only did paper manual searching. And so then it did gradually evolve. So at the beginning, I would say, it was really collegial because also we were in these big, huge rooms where all of the art was in the shoes. You could just call over to somebody and say, hey, I'm looking for this. And they'd be like, look in the third shoe down or something like that. So there was a lot of interaction. And then eventually we did get to the point where a lot of it was put on computer, our searching, of course, and then our files. So probably I have seen quite an evolution from when I started to where we are the present day. And of course, now we are totally all on the computer. So in some ways, it does lead to probably more isolation. But it also made telework easier because now, as long as you had the terminal and the connection, you could get into searching, you could get into the applications, et cetera.
You mentioned that you actually got involved with POPA Union early on in your career, and you're obviously the head of it. What motivated you to get involved? And after all these years, why do you want some of these headaches I'm sure you have at your plate?
Well, it's interesting. I got involved because I was treated badly during my pregnancy.
Oh, wow.
So this was probably only about 2 years after I joined, and the union helped me. And actually, we got a maternity-paternity policy out of that because I was literally denied the leave that had already been approved on basically my due date. So it was a little stressful, as you can imagine. But we got that worked out. And then afterwards, yes, I became involved. I was the person that knew about all the family-friendly programs, that sort of thing, and got involved in a lot of negotiation. And they get you in as an officer, and then you move up, and then all of a sudden it's, oh, the president's leaving. Yeah. You're next. But no, I think it's been a good experience. I'm very proud of the fact that we have been able to get this new CBA done. And I'm hoping that will keep us good here for a while.
What do you see your role, the role of the POPA? What is like?
We might be different than some other especially federal agencies. As you're familiar with, we have so many programs with the applicant that involve either making applications special, all these type of things. So management does talk with us and come to a lot of agreements of how we're going to do these things. So we do probably work more with the management than maybe at other places. At other places, they may do their CBA and that's it. Whereas it seems like there's always something that we're talking about.
So you're a resource for them. Yeah. So that's interesting. And the acting director, Coke Morgan Stewart, she spent time at the USPTO. Did you have a chance to work with her during her last, she was here before?
Just probably a little bit. I knew who she was. And different administrations interact differently, especially the politicals with the union. But no, Coke has been meeting with the union presidents, and she does want to hear our ideas.
That's great. And obviously, you've talked about all the changes. Anyway, I guess you can put the last few weeks in context to what you've seen over the years, because obviously there's a recency bias, right? Everything seems like it's on fire the way it's never before. But I guess to you, how do you put the last 2 weeks in?
It's been interesting. I would say, because I've been through quite a few transition changes. And to be quite honest, especially the PTO, most of them are pretty smooth. Usually there's a career person that is the temporary acting until they get the political head in and whatever. So this time has been a bit different, getting Coke in here so fast. But also, let me just say, it's a different administration. I probably have not gotten a whole lot of sleep in the last couple weeks. And there's just a lot going on that we're watching. There's certain things, we operate different than a lot of agencies. First of all, of course, obviously, our funds are coming from our applicants. And there's just certain things that we need to keep going. I'm not expecting that we're going to go through and slash a whole bunch of employees. We're trying to hire employees. We need more examiners. While it's hard when you start hearing about everything that's going on at different agencies, I have to think back and realize that we've got to have examiners to examine, or it's not going to work.
So you said you have been getting a lot of sleep. What has been keeping you awake?
Of course, telework, because it is so important to our agency. And plus, let's face reality, we don't have enough room to put everybody in here. And plus, as I told you when I started with the union, I was involved with a lot of family-friendly things. So I do really feel for our employees. A lot of them do live far away from the office, and I don't want to lose somebody just because they don't want to move to Alexandria. That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
And it seems like there's been a lot of concern in line with what you were saying. Everything we've seen, at least the way I've seen it, like the first OPM memo said, well, the agency head will make exemptions. The Commerce Department memo said USPTO is exempt. The USPTO memo said it does not apply to CBA. And then Coke said 80% the return to office policies won't apply to examiners who are. So where do you see things stand now with the return to office as it applies to examiners, and how are you feeling about it, and how's everybody else feeling about it?
One thing I'd like to take a step back, because words were poorly chosen when that DOC memo said we were exempt. What it means is that the PTO, being fee funded and our special status with AIA and stuff, we don't usually always follow all the memos that DOC puts out. So exempt was probably a poor choice of a word. I would have said this memo doesn't apply to us. Because then what Koch did, she basically reissued the same memo and took that paragraph out, and everybody's, oh my God. And it's, no, exempt did not mean what you thought it meant. And so the memo that she then issued was proper. So POPA definitely has taken the stand that our telework agreements are valid. They convey with our CBA, and that it's very important for the agency that we do allow telework to continue. We can't afford to lose a whole bunch of examiners, and I'm really worried that's what would happen.
Is it, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like to me, because of everything that you said, you think like everything's going to work out in terms of that, examiners being allowed to telework, but the thing that I guess is causing maybe some of the anxiety, just there's no finality to that message.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Nope, exactly. And that is what's causing definitely a lot of anxiety and angst. And it would be nice if that wasn't occurring, because I do worry that it's a distraction that we probably don't need.
Yeah. Well, what about supervisor examiners? They're not part of POPA, from what I understand.
That's federal government wide. Managers can't and supervisors can't be members of unions.
Yeah. So what do you think will happen with that, with the supervisor examiners, who are also obviously, a lot of them are remote?
The memos people have been seeing that have talked about people coming in, you'll notice it says this excludes CBA employees, but that is covering managers in general. Right now, I think we're at the point that people that have an office, so probably people that were doing partial telework, like maybe a couple days a week, they are coming in. And I think it's got to be a gradual transition, because we got to fit all these people in these offices. And so they've got to figure out where we're putting people. They got to see if offices need to be cleaned at this point, refurnished. We have lots of furnished, but sometimes you end up with too many desks in one room and stuff like that. They got to work on that before they would bring in like the next group, which would probably be the people that are within 50 miles of the office.
You're head of the Union of Patent Examiners, so I want to talk a little bit about what it's like, view of examiners. You talked about how when you started, there were these shoe boxes for people who don't know, and that's how you, I guess it's like how if you went to a library and you searched for relevant patents. What is like when you think of an examiner, what is their role? What are they supposed to be doing, a patent examiner?
Basically, what they're doing is, I'll go through the steps that usually when you pick up the application, the first thing you're doing is you're reading through it, reading through the claims. You're probably looking for formalities at that point, see if there's 112s, that type of thing. And then while you're doing that, it depends on mechanical, electrical, and chemical actually probably do processes a little bit differently. Yeah. Even though I was chemical, I was more a method person. So what would happen is I was big one with the drawings, all my layers in order and had it in front of me. So then when I went searching, whether it was in the shoes or online, I had everything right there for me, and then I could search through and know what I needed to do. And again, different areas use different databases. Of course, the chemicals who are more bio are going to use different databases than I would use, doing more semiconductor stuff. So that's basically it. But also, sometimes I don't think the public is aware that we are on a production system. So that's one thing that really helps with telework. It's not just people going home and you don't know what they're doing. They still have to produce actions for the applications, and we get a certain amount of time for that. And not only is there time to do things, but there's what's called docket management, which is a pendency type of issue. So not only do you need to get enough counts done to make your production, but then you also have to make sure you're doing things fast enough or in the right order to make sure you don't get in, because you can get trouble for production. You can also get in trouble for not having pendency.
Yeah, and it counts if you're in this field that you hear about it. And some people say it might drive the wrong behavior, but also there's 8,000 examiners now, but I guess maybe we need 10,000. Any thoughts about, is that the worst, best option, or the best out of all the options, or do you think there's any improvements that could be made to how examiners work?
Yeah, the problem is there's a lot of different things you could do. When you look in Europe, they have people that search and then maybe others that actually do what we would call our actions. We've looked at different things over the years, but part of the problem is it still comes down to you've got this number of people, you got these number of applications, we need to get them done. How are we going to get them done? So that's where we find that we did revise the count system. Oh, but that's been quite a while ago. That was when Dave Kapos was here. And then there seems to be tweaks and stuff going on. We had the big timing routing and PAP done in the administration before last. We're still doing adjustments to that because it's not quite right getting the amount of time people need for a case or getting all the cases to the right people like we would want it to be.
And what do you think makes somebody a good examiner?
You probably, there's plenty, I guess, of extroverts. But if you're an introvert and can sit in your office for a while, we've had a lot of people like that are successful. Yeah. There are a lot of people, like for me, when I first came, it's, oh, good, you've told me how much I need to do each bi-week. So I don't have to worry about comparing myself to anybody else. You've told me what I need to do. So some people work on that. And then there are other people that it just may not work out. And that's hard for some people because they can have PhDs, they can have a law degree, and it's not a sign of failure. I think it is more your personality and if you can deal with this. Because you know what? Every other Saturday, when the one bi-week ends, the next one starts, and you're doing this over and over again.
Yeah. For example, if your goal is perfection, it's probably not
We have had some people that, as we say when we talk to brand new examiners, we say you can do probably the best action the patent office has ever seen, but if it takes you 3 months to do it, that's not going to work.
You mentioned like the tools that you use change. Now you sit at your computer and there's all these different systems constantly getting updated. The latest, I guess, the tool that I've heard about is the AI searching tool. What do you think is the state of the tools that the examiners are using? How are these new tools impacting the job of patent examiners?
Well, once we started putting everything to IT, that created, I think, a more complicated system. I'm not pulling out a drawer now. If the power goes off, if the internet goes down, you're going to have people that just can't do the job. Yes, we have seen some changes. I think some of us would maybe like to make sure the search tool was more perfected before we put a lot of AI on it. I know POPA has advocated for, I wish we did a little bit more AI and just basic things. Like AI can be real helpful in filling out forms and doing stuff like that.
Yeah, like automating that. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes I think instead of helping with stuff that might take things off an examiner's plate, we go for, want of a better word, the sexy thing, the AI that can do this and that and everything. And they have done a good job of giving us more training. Because at the beginning, I was like, okay, AI, and I push the button, but you're not explaining to me what is that doing when I push the button. Yeah. So I think they've done a better job of trying to train examiners so they understand, hey, when you push the button, this is what's happening.
And you still work as an examiner.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess in the future, I know it's hard to predict, but you've seen how things evolve. What will patent examination look like maybe in 30 years?
Yeah, no, that's almost hard to grasp, I think, at times. What I would like to see is maybe something that maybe is a little bit more European, where you could have a little bit more collaboration. So in other words, if you have an application, we do, of course, restrictions now. Yeah. And this is just Kathy's opinion. Yeah. This is not anybody else. But I might get an application that it might have a chemical in there. It might have my semiconductor. It might have the process of making the semiconductor. Yeah. And wouldn't it be interesting, but this would be hard to figure out how to do the time and everything. If I did one part, then I passed it to the next person. They did another part, etc. But that's just a wild dream, and I don't think we've ever gotten close enough to how we could do that. And also, how fair is it if somebody decides to put 6 inventions in one application and somebody else only has one? Yeah. And you'd have to work on how much the cost would be.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've heard examiners say, actually to me, and they're like, I usually just am examine methods.
Yeah.
This is outside my wheelhouse. But also, I think what she's interesting is about even saying AI. There's AI in everything now. Would you want the people from AI art units who have that technical knowledge? Maybe there's some kind of interesting conversation that could take place, but are harder because of how the structure.
The structure and the time constraints.
I want to talk about a little bit about, I guess, the last administration. Their big focus was robust and reliable patent rights. What was your take on what they meant by robust and reliable patent rights?
For the patent examiner, a lot doesn't change for us.
Yeah.
You know, whether the emphasis on one thing or the other. In general, we have policies we follow. We have to search. We have to find this. 112, 103. So we go along with maybe not, and this is not to denigrate anything, but without maybe the advertising, what people are looking at. From us day to day, it may not look that different.
Yeah, I guess from a practical standpoint, obviously, there's the formalities and then searching and applying that art. But I guess one thing, from those guidance was, at least what examiners would tell me, is they train us to make more 112 rejections or more 101 rejections or more double patenting rejections. I guess what kind of impact do you think that has?
So part of it is, though, like I've got all the tools. I know what a 112 is. I know what this is. And yes, the office does do different emphasis from time to time. We just hope that they tell us before so that we know what we're supposed to be doing. And yes, sometimes they'll have training modules come out and then things are a little bit different. In my area, I did not deal with a lot of 101. So I personally didn't go through a lot of that caused a lot of examiners some angst. And that was probably one of the biggest learning curves, I think, in the last few years. I know it's been quite a while, but that was hard.
Yeah, and I think it's a good area. Obviously, after Alice came out, everybody was confused.
Yes.
Federal Circuit judges said they were confused. Then and I think from perspective of Director Yanko, he said, we're going to put out the revised 2090 guidance because it's really impractical for examiners to sit there and figure out how to apply every single court decision there. And we did see 101 rejections go down, and then they went up. What are you hearing from examiners in 101? Is it realistic to expect examiners to do a full 101 analysis with the way things are?
I think they've been able to do what we've been taught to do as far as the policy. That did take a long time to evolve. And it was very frustrating for examiners, as I'm sure it was for people on the outside. I'm hoping we're in a better place now. I don't hear as many complaints about 101 from examiners as I used to before. And complaints isn't probably the right word. It was more, I need more training on this. We need to know how to do this a little bit more. That's what people were always really striving for in the long run. Okay, we've got this. Okay, just tell me, how are we going to use it now? What are we going to do? That's what people want to know.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned that because obviously the USPTO put out one example with AI inventions for 101, and then they put out a different example, and some examiners are saying, well, this new example should apply more than the other. But as for practitioners, I guess the takeaway from that is different examiners have a completely different impression of what's patent eligible under 101. Any thoughts about that, whether that's an issue or you'll always have that kind of variation?
I think you're always going to have that variation because also what I see, there's always been a variation between like chemical, electrical, and mechanical. Yeah. There's just certain things that we do a little bit differently, all the way from restrictions to just the rejections. So I don't know if you could, you better have AI probably doing the office actions if you actually do expect to have perfect harmony, because I don't know how you do it. If not, we're all human, and even sitting in the same training, people might hear maybe different things, or every case is different too.
Yeah.
That's why I know it frustrates people at sometimes, even examiners, that like when they say, oh, it's case by case. But a lot of times it does come down to that. And the facts are different.
One thing that happened during the last administration is that by some records, the backlog got record levels. I guess one measure was 1.2 million pending applications, and the average total pendency time went went up to 30 months from 23.8 months. What do you think was the cause for that, I guess, from your vantage point?
I mean, what I think I've heard, Tim, is that they do all the modeling and everything, but COVID was weird. And I think that threw maybe some of the models off. And also, that was a really hard time to be trying to hire people, too. So I think a confluence of a whole bunch of stuff came together at the wrong time that led to that. I know now they're working on it. There's a lot of things going on. I get really worried about losing examiners because you're not going to get pendency lower with less examiners. So we really need to make sure we get some examiners in and get them trained up.
One thing you mentioned stood out to me is Director David Kapos, because they changed kind of the count system. And part of that was when he came in, it was a very big backlog. He wanted examiners to work with applicants. And that's what he would always talk about. And part of the counts, I think, was changed to give examiners more time to do that.
Not really. What the count system actually did was it put more time in the first action. So that gave examiners maybe more time to do a little bit more searching. My opinion, I don't think any of the changes we made, because I actually sat in those negotiations, I don't think anything was the purpose to make us work more together. Now,
not together with the applicants, I guess.
I'm sorry. I guess that's what I meant.
Sorry.
But that probably was the time, though, that maybe more emphasis on interviews.
Yeah.
And interviews can be good. I was very happy when I became a primary. I felt like people weren't trying to push me into things as much as maybe they had been before. And I've always used interviews to the advantage to try to get the application done.
Yeah.
And I know some people, there's the whole, I want to do it actually in person. I think our tools, and I'm talking collaboration tools now, I think they're pretty good. And I think that probably works as good as like cramming 3 inventors into my physical office with me. We can all be maybe a little more comfortable and use whiteboards if we need to, or whatever they want to do to show me stuff.
Maybe then on, I guess you said there's a lot of activity now to try to bring the backlog down. Can you give us, what do you think is going to happen to tackle, obviously besides the whole teleworking issue, what do you foresee happening in terms of trying to get that resolved?
Well, I think some of the things they've talked about, which, again, we need help within this transition, is, of course, hiring more people. That's probably the biggest one that I hear. But with the hiring, of course, you got to train the people. So there's a lot of things, like a lot of dominoes lined up. And then to train people, the people that are training them, they're maybe being taken offline of actually doing an application. So there is a lot of things that have to be aligned.
Besides like more people who have more time, is there any other kind of things about the examination process that you think could... Well, I guess here's another example. I guess like they had the FCP program and then the first action interview pilot program. And I think the intentions of those were to speed up examination, make it more efficient. Anything like that? And obviously I think they discontinued those programs, but I guess thoughts
just recently on the AFCP 2.0. Yeah. I haven't heard of any right now. That's not uncommon, again, being in this transition. But hiring just seems the most obvious one. Yeah. And, examiners do need more time to examine. It really can get to some people, and why I think some people trade out is it can become a drudge at times because, like I said, the whole every 2 weeks, here we go, start all over again. And there's sometimes not even enough time to breathe, it feels.
Anything, I guess, that stands out to you from people who have a kind of a different perspective on the panel system coming from different kind of...
It is interesting because you do, of course, have small inventors, you have pharma firms, you have all sorts of different people, which I find fascinating to meet. And I find that they're invested in the system. They're really interested. And I think they do like talking to me because I can provide them a perspective that maybe they've never thought about. There's still a lot of applicants who don't understand the count system. That's not a criticism because like docket management, I wouldn't expect there's anybody outside of examiners who understand docket management. And even that can be hard. So I think it works both ways, that the PPAC has been very good for both sides.
And I guess you mentioned there's different perspectives there. Are you surprised that there's a diversion of views of what the reality is of how the PTO operates?
Yeah, no, I think they do. I think they come out with a different perspective after they've been there a couple years. And I think most of them are very appreciative of the time. Like I said, I'm appreciative to spend time with them, and I think it helps them understand better. And I think all of the people I've served with on the PPAC, I think they really do take it seriously that they are representing inventors in general. I'm always admire that.
So we mentioned briefly the PTAB judges, but the PTAB I guess there was a board, but they didn't focus so much on post-grant proceedings to invalidate issued patents. Any thoughts about that becoming more of the process of the patent system where...
Yeah, I think that was really legislatively led. And so I would say the U.S. Patent Office been around a lot of years, and we're pretty adaptable because Congress is going to do whatever laws that they deem that should be taken. And our job is then to take it and make sure we understand how to use it and then train everybody. I've still got my little cards from when AIA came and we got to change all the letters and numbers and stuff. It can be quite overwhelming at times.
This is actually Professor Dan Brown's idea. His idea is that if issued patents being challenged at the PTAB, and sometimes actually prior art that the examiner is being applied, they should go back to the examiner and give him a chance to provide his input. Any thoughts about that idea, and do you think it's practical?
I know the PPAC wants to have feedback back to examiners. I don't quite know when things change. Like when I first came here, if I had, especially an interference case, of course, PTAB was much smaller. It was called even something else then. Yeah. I could go talk to one of the judges, and we'd work on what the interference is and that type of thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No, I distinctly remember a couple of those.
On a case you worked on before?
Yeah, when I was working on it was going to be an interference.
Yeah.
So I would go and talk to them, and we'd work it out things. But I think things have grown. PTAB is of course, much bigger than when I started. Yeah. And also their duties have changed. They're on a production system too. When you have production systems on both ends, it makes it really hard to have... I don't have an hour to go over and sit with a PTAB panel and discuss a case. Yeah. I think in the examining corps, we of course do have the pre-appeal conferences and stuff, where at least it's not just one examiner just going off on their own. I mean, you actually are discussing it, and you come to a consensus that this should go to PTAB, or no, it could probably be allowed, that type of thing. So I think that is good too.
You mentioned Howard Lutnick. He's a former CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald. He is an inventor and all that. Obviously, you're working with Cook Morgan Stewart. It seems like you're having a good relationship with her already. How do you expect the next few years to play out? If we talk again in 4 years, will that...
I think it'll be interesting, because I don't know if we've had anybody maybe so knowledgeable about patents and the patent system. I really enjoyed...
Like Howard...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just, I was like the Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, just the last one. I was pretty excited when she did the semiconductor stuff, because of course that's what I examine. And so I really appreciated that with her. So I'm very interested to see what interest he takes in us, and just his ideas, what he thinks.
One of the themes you missed is obviously the importance of keeping examiners once they're hired. Anything in terms of retention that you think could help?
Over the years, I've seen mentoring programs, even support like within a tech center, like matching up a new person with somebody that's not quite as new, but yet not like me, ancient. I think they've been trying to do a lot of stuff. I think what part of the problem is, though, is, again, when we want to get pendency down, then it's harder. Decisions have to be made. What are we going to spend time on? Because we just can't let people have as much non-examining time as they might want.
Yeah. And we're getting towards the ends, but I want to get your thoughts. There's examiners listening to this podcast. They reach out to let me know. Any message that you'd want to tell the examiners at this moment in time where...
Sure. Yeah, no, because it has been a really hard... Are we at 3 weeks now? Yeah. And I chose this as my career. I came here figuring that, yes, I wanted to be here as a career. I came from a family where my father was career military. Both of my parents served in the federal government. And so I am proud that I'm an examiner. I took an oath to the Constitution. And I really respect all of our examiners. When the deferred resignation first came out, and there was the comments in there that we should leave federal government low productivity and go to private where we would be in a high productivity, I was insulted. And I went out to the employees and said, I am insulted by this. And a lot of them, it was great. They sent me just like a nice little email. Thank you. Thank you for somebody supporting us, because it's real easy to just talk about federal employees. Examiners work hard. We're on a production system. Not everybody can do it. And I'm proud of the examining corps, and I'm proud that we all serve the American public.
You mentioned kind of importance of when you join the organization of USPTO, kind of listening to examiners and all that. And you don't need this podcast to do that, but anything I guess you'd want, maybe that you're sharing with maybe people who don't have quite your perspective about what they should keep in mind about the USPTO.
Oh, this is the public now? We're talking
actually just new USPTO leadership.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The leadership, we are fortunate in that a lot of our leadership, the ones that are career, not political, although Coke worked here before, they were part of the system. Yeah. And I think I like to always remind them every once in a while, remember you were an examiner. And I think we do work pretty well together. We got a CBA done, and I don't think there's really anything I feel I have to tell them. I think they do respect the examiners. I think they do respect the union, and that we are here to help the examiners, but to help the office.
Yeah. And I guess, if you do have that background, obviously, being an examiner, but also being part of the USPTO, you have that perspective. Right. And then for the public. Who just hear about stuff about patents.
Yeah. Just understand that we are humans behind here. We have chosen to do public service. And we are pretty fierce about protecting the patent system. Not only is it our livelihood, we do feel that strongly about it. We're in the Constitution. Yeah. We're pretty proud of that.
Thank you for coming on Clause 8. I enjoyed talking to you. So
good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. New episodes of Clause 8 come out every 2 weeks, so be sure not to miss it by subscribing at voiceofip.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.